Welcome to Decoding Parenthood, where we unleash the secrets of parenting. Today, we would like to welcome back Dr. Arlene Gerson, who is a child psychologist, and we are going to talk about mental health. So, welcome, Dr. Gerson. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me back. I think decoding parenthood is a really good opportunity for parents to learn some things that they perhaps already know,
Yep.
but to give them the tools to feel like they can move through parenthood in a mindful way.
Yep.
So my background is that I'm a PhD clinical psychologist, and I have had many years of experience running programs, clinical programs, and doing research and seeing kids. Um, I was at Johns Hopkins for 23 years and then retired from Johns Hopkins and started Gerson Behavioral Health, which is a service for kids and families to look at ways that they can improve their quality of life at home and community,
Okay.
and it's cool.
So, what age do you go to, or is there no limit? You see ages all patients, or is there a limit that you have?
I generally stop seeing patients when they become adults.
Okay. So 21.
21.
Okay. Just for, our listeners and our viewers to know if, they wanted to reach out to you, they would know what your background is in. So today, we are going to talk about mental health. We as adults, we know about physical health. We go get an annual checkup every year. We look at our vitals, our, blood sugar and our heart rate and cholesterol. But are there any matrices for mental health? Or how do you measure mental health?
You know, that's a really good and important question because the measurement of mental health really is important because then it allows you to decide if you need to intervene.
Mhm.
So when we think of mental health, we think of one's ability to deal with the emotions
Mhm.
that come about as a result of our interacting with the world. Now, I think that sounds a little academic.
Mhm.
Essentially, mental health is the ability to get along with others and the ability to take care of yourself from an emotional point of view. So I think like mental health has to do with the ability to regulate your emotions
Mhm.
when necessary and the ability to tolerate distress
Mhm.
when things don't go your way. So there are some ways that
Mhm.
pediatricians these days quantify mental health. They have surveys
Mhm.
that parents fill out,
Mhm.
and these surveys look at different aspects of the child to determine to what extent their mental health is problematic.
Mhm.
So these surveys look at how a child is doing with peers, how a child is doing at home, how a child is doing with self-care, and how a child is doing in school. And so when you sort of take all these different pieces of
Mhm.
a child and put them together,
Mhm.
it gives you a picture of their mental health.
So these surveys, when when pediatrician does them, I remember that they're usually done at a yearly checkup. So I remember like taking my daughter to the pediatrician, and they do this assessment where parents fill all of these out online. Now, unfortunately, it's not something like, mental health is not something that might be visible to a parent at at a random time, right? So we we as parents don't want to wait until 1 year appointment to find out that my child is having peer pressure issues in school or is having a hard time at school. right? We want to find it out early on so that something drastic doesn't happen in their lives. When we have, issues with blood pressure or like diabetes, we a body kind of senses that response and we know that something's not normal. With mental health, and especially with young children, how do we know as a parent that they're going through something? Because when you ask a child a question, oh, what did you do at school today? Or, how was school today? The answer is usually one word. It's either nothing or it was okay, right? You're not getting a detailed answer about something that's affecting them either short term or long term. How can you dissect, some information from a child so you know that something is wrong or my child needs help?
Well, I think the most sure shot way is to see whether or not their emotional functioning is getting in the way of them doing the age appropriate things. So when you're talking about a 3-year-old, all 3-year-olds have tantrums. But a 3-year-old that's going to have tantrums that are regularly sort of out of the ballpark with regard to the relationship between how they're feeling and what didn't go their way, if that's really extreme and extreme frequently, then you have a guess that there's something going on. You don't necessarily know what it is. One of the most common problems that go undetected for
Mhm.
kids is anxiety. You don't necessarily see it as anxiety. You might see it as aggression, or you might see it as depression, or you might see it as conduct problems.
Mhm.
But when you see something that's sort of out of the ordinary in terms of intensity, frequency, or duration, then trust yourself as a parent, right? Like, trust yourself as a parent because you're picking up something
Mhm.
that before somebody else can see it. And these days, there are a number of early intervention programs that do a really good job of screening for kids that are not just having speech problems or not just having fine motor
Mhm.
problems, but kids that are sort of very emotionally sensitive uh, and demonstrating, even at a very young age, that there's something going on from their mental health.
So this could be, you know, a very touchy subject, but according to you, how has COVID affected mental health in children and also even in adults? In the last 3 years, things have changed. Our lives have not been the same they used to be in 2019. Do you think COVID has increased the number of mental health cases? Has it remained the same or has it decreased?
Well, I'm gonna diverge for a moment and talk about a research study
Okay.
because there's a great research study that had over 17,000 kids,
Mhm.
and it looked at mental health. And one of the things over a 5-year period, and one of the things that this study concluded was that the proportion of kids between the ages of uh, 3 and 17
Mhm.
that had depression or anxiety was increasing. And it looked at then it looked at just the pandemic and after the pandemic. And what it found was that the frequency of conduct problems in kids
Mhm.
was also increasing. Now, what we see in schools and daycares is a lot of these kids have social skills
Mhm.
deficits. Deficits in terms of what you would expect for them to have
Mhm.
at a certain age. So when you have decreased socialization, social opportunities, not only in school, but at home and in your neighborhood, then you don't have a chance to practice.
Yeah.
And and, uh, and when you don't have a chance to practice and you're put in a situation that you don't have the skills, you know, there can there can be meltdown.
Mhm.
And so we see frequency of meltdown as another indicator of mental health.
Okay. So the opportunities to not able to express yourself or communicate your feelings has increased during the times of COVID.
Right, especially for kid to kid communication.
Mm.
It's not clear that emotional health, anxiety, and depression went down even more significantly or got worse even more significantly after the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We need more research.
Right.
We need more research.
Right.
But we certainly see in middle school and high schoolers
Mm-hmm.
that the social isolation was very detrimental
Mm.
to emotional well.
Right. So, coming back to your study, are there things parents can do to safeguard mental health?
Yes, there are. I wanted to say that this study that I've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
has 174,000 kids in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really powerful study because what it does is it takes a huge group of kids
Mm.
and looks at factors that are improving or factors that are getting worse over a 5-year period. And so not only do you see that anxiety and depression increasing, such that with the prevalence of anxiety in the general population, you would be likely to see 1 in 25 in a classroom of 25 kids that would be clinically depressed.
Wow.
And in a classroom of 25 kids
Mm.
with anxiety currently,
Mm-hmm.
you would see 2 in a classroom of 20.
Wow.
So those are kids that teachers and parents can pick out and say, this is a kid that really needs help.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't necessarily see are the kids that are struggling. So one of the things I also want to point out in this study is over the course of 5 years, 3 other things happened I think are important and relate to mental health. One is that there was a decrease in parents reading to their children. I think reading has a lot of benefits. And in fact, in older kids, it's mandated. But one of the things that reading does is it helps kids master feelings and how to deal with those feelings. And books can be a really good jumping off point for kids to talk about their own feelings. The other thing that this study pointed out was that physical activity in kids continues to decrease, even before the pandemic. And we know that with physical activity, your body releases hormones, chemicals that stabilize or improve mood. So another thing that parents can do is make sure that their kids get enough physical activity. So how much is enough?
Yeah.
But so part of what being enough is what's practical. So what I like to ask parents is to go be physical with their kids outside in the fresh air if possible, inside if not, running, jumping, riding bikes, throwing balls, 10 minutes a day. Most likely that 10 minutes is going to be extended. But I think as a parent, if you can just sort of say, okay, this is only going to be for a few minutes, then it can be fit into a schedule. The other thing that this study showed was that parents felt less confident as time has gone with their ability to be a good parent. And this is very interesting because we don't necessarily see a crop of parents coming to our attention that are worse than a generation ago. But I think more so what's happening is that parents are just inundated with so much information and so many recommendations that they oftentimes feel like they're just not equipped to do a good job. With regard to emotional functioning, the best one of the other best strategies is to make talking about feeling part of everyday life. Because, and not just have the child talk about feelings, your child, but you talk about your feelings. So the kids realize and recognize that all feelings are legitimate. So as a parent, we want to validate our kids' feelings. I mean, it doesn't matter if I think that's a scary dog or not. What matters is if my kid thinks it's a scary dog. So yeah, I could say, well, that does look like a scary dog. He's barking and he's wagging his tail and he's bigger than you. But then you can offer some coping strategies. But look, the dog is behind the fence. Or look, the owner has the dog on a lead. Wow, most dogs, when they wag their tails, are friendly. So you can validate your kids' feelings. Yes, they're sad. Yes, they're angry. Yes, they're anxious. Yes, they're worried. But then give them strategy that they can use to be able to be okay with those feelings.
So when you break up, you have come up with amazing points such as, reading and the physical, outside time, running around, spending time with your children, talking about the feelings. But up to what age, a parent can do that? Because as, somebody who might have a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, they're more open to, sitting with you, talking about their feelings or going on a walk with you. And then as they start becoming teenagers, the distance, starts happening between the parent and the child, where the child doesn't want to talk about their feelings anymore. They don't want their parent to read a book to them, of course, right? So you're not having this social interaction anymore. How can parents who have teenagers still, have that bonding time or, let's talk time? Like, do you have things that parents can do with their teenagers that can still create those, amazing memories?
I think it's important to remember that good mental health is something that takes attention. So if you start off with a kid, with a young child that feels comfortable saying, I'm angry, I want to hit you, but I won't, you know, or I'm sad, I want to do this, but it can't happen. Kids learn that language and it becomes normal
Okay.
to sort of talk about your feelings. Now, yes, kids when they hit preteen and teen are much less likely to talk about their feelings. But in terms of using this strategy of validation, if I see my teenager sulking around, not wanting to eat, having trouble sleeping, avoiding friends, I'm going to sort of say, hey, something's going on. And I can say, looks like you are feeling a little down today. What kinds of things are upsetting you? Now, even if the kid says nothing, you're still validating for them. that they're having a feeling that is a big feeling. And I think the other thing is that as kids get older, they like experiential. So, so for example, an older kid, you can go on a hike, a walk. You can go paint pottery. You can um, learn how to play a video game. It's their favorite video. You can watch a favorite movie. So these are things that you can do to have experiences with your kid and the opportunity, if we're talking about feelings, but not necessarily sitting them down and saying, so tell me,
How are you
tell me
feeling?
about your feelings today.
Yeah. Because I think it's also those habits that, you mentioned that you build with your children. It's you start when they're young, so when they hit that age, they feel more confident or they feel more um there is there's more trust in
I like that. There's
yep,
more trust.
more trust
There's more
in
trust that if I say
right.
something to you, you're going to be okay with it.
Right. And I think it's, you start at that young age when you do that, so that when they're 15 and 16, that it has already built up for the, 10 years. So they're able to come and share how they're feeling with you. But if you've never had that conversation with them and you start when it's 15 and you're like, so I'm angry and how are you feeling? They're going to give you that eye roll, like, what are you talking about kind of thing. So it's important to, start at that young age and, they might be angry for the majority part because you didn't give them that gummy worm that they wanted, right? But it's still important to talk about the feelings over time so that they have that trust in you. So when it gets to that age, when they're, in school or in high school or in college and they're going through some things, they're able to come and speak to you. So um, that information is very, very important. How are, mental health or mental disorders like diagnosed in young children? So we see a child and they might have, a new member in the family, like a new baby, and they're going through, a tough time. The parents are not giving them the full 100% attention that they used to get. This might just be a temporary, mental health situation. But as you mentioned previously, like you look at, how their behaviors have changed and you work on it. But it's also, difficult to get information from a 3-year-old. So when as a therapist talking to a 3-year-old, how do you get information from them on, what's bothering them?
Well, the first part of your question is, how is a mental health problem diagnosed?
Mm-hmm.
And the the answer to that is it's diagnosed based on, for young children, based on direct observations, parent report,
Mm-hmm.
and, and child and child report.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get pretty good observations from teachers. And what you're looking for a teacher is a kid having difficulty in one aspect of well-being, in physical functioning, perhaps in emotion regulation, perhaps in social functioning. And then from there, a psychologist will sort of take the observations and the reports and look at the criteria that have been established and determine whether or not a child has enough of the target symptoms for them to have a clinical diagnosis.
Okay.
But again, just because a kid doesn't have a clinical diagnosis of OCD,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that it's not interfering with their functioning at school or at home.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be open to dealing with things when they're not major problems. So how do I talk with the kid about feelings? I oftentimes will will say things like, gosh, everybody has a lot of feelings every day. And some feelings feel good and some feelings don't feel so good. There's some kids feel real happy during most days. Are you that kind of kid? Some kids feel really sad. So are you that kind of kid? Some kids. So I go through the
Different emotions.
different emotions, and I try to let the child know that whatever they're feeling is
It's
good.
okay.
It's
Yeah.
okay, and that their parents are okay with them feeling whatever they're feeling. There are a lot of kids that feel like they need to hide their feelings from their parents as well. And for those kids, you're not necessarily going to see the outward sign, and you'll see some inwards. So you might see some perfectionism. You might see some self-deprecating state. You might see lack of confidence in doing things. Not necessarily is it a disorder, a mental health disorder, but it's a adjustment to the demands of life that oftentimes kids don't have the skills for.
So, based on everything that we have been talking about, and the things that we're seeing in the community and in the society, um, we as parents always, we have been feeling that the anxiety and depression is getting worse or has got worse over the last 2-3 years. What can we do as parents to improve the quality of life of our children?
It's a big question. I don't know that I have all the answers.
Like that perfect, answer to the best quality of life.
Exactly. Like, let me get out
Or
my
does
magic
or
wand.
does it
and-
even exist kind of thing,
So good. So good question. It turns out that quality of life is described as the well-being of a child in different areas of their life. And so the areas that are most often talked about, both by therapists and by researchers, is that there's a physical functioning aspect of quality of life. There's an emotional functioning aspect of quality of life. There's a social functioning aspect, and then there's a school or education functioning. And there are things that parents can do at different for children of different ages that can contribute to the overall well-being of their child, and thus directly contribute to their mental health.
So the 4 aspects you mentioned is physical, emotional, social, and then educational, be it school or preschool, right?
Right.
So previously you mentioned the physical, having, at least a minimum of 10 minutes of physical activity outside, right? Then for the emotional part, we're talking about feelings, correct?
Yeah.
How we are feeling today, or, it's okay to be feeling a certain way on certain days, and, how we address feelings with children,
Right.
right?
And then from a real practical
Right.
example, feelings can be taught and practiced with kids through play.
Okay.
Kids love to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, we talked about, learning about feelings through reading, but kids can act out with their stuffed animals, or if you have puppets, they can act out situations in their real life that they've had big feelings, or they can act out situations in the lives of perhaps their favorite cartoon characters. And you can talk about your feelings. So, for example, when I get angry at my kids or at my grandkids or at my daughter, I sometimes I get angry for no good reason. I'm angry at something that happened some other time and I take it out on them.
Mm-hmm.
So, so if I were to say, gosh, I'm really upset about something that happened at work today, and
Mm-hmm.
so I lost my cool with you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think before I talked.
Mm.
So for parents to share their own feelings are important as well.
To summarize, all that we have spoken about, the physical and the social, the emotional, the school or the educational institution, parents, um, they're going to listen to this and feel like, oh my God, I need to change everything in my schedule. I have 3 kids. I have to get the 10-minute physical thing done, and I have to start talking about feelings, and I have to check on their mental health. What would you recommend to them on, how they should start this journey?
Well, I think starting the journey is just to recognize that your child is has a lot of different pieces and parts to their lives that make up their ability to live life joyfully.
Hmm.
And so while we've made a number of suggestions today, we know it's not feasible for you to do all those things at once.
Yep. Yep.
So how would you make a decision which of those things to do? Well, I would say feelings are really important.
Okay.
They are sort of the building
Hmm.
of how we deal with ourselves and our lives.
Hmm.
So integrating feelings into everyday life, uh, playing around with feelings and reading, role playing feelings
Hmm.
are all really important things to do. And it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time. It takes paying attention to the moment. It takes putting down your phone and looking and seeing what your child is really feeling.
Just being there.
Just being there, present with your child,
Hmm.
is really important. And then with regard to physical activity, you know, uh, it's a goal, but since we do know that there's a relationship between physical activity and emotional health, it should be a priority. So maybe you can't play with your kid for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
But let's say maybe they're going to be on some sort of a sports team, or they're going to do some kind of a individual gymnastics,
Hmm.
or you're going to encourage them to play with their friends in the neighborhood. There are a lot of ways to encourage the physical functioning quadrant without you having to do it yourself.
Right. And it's also important, as you said, it's important to take those small steps, those changes that, the ideas and the suggestions that you have given us, they're not going to be all executed and implemented on day one. It's where you start, and of course, starting to talk about feelings. And it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. Um, and it's important for the child to know that it's okay so that they can come and communicate to you when something is not right. Right. So it is important to, not over stress about it and just start small and work on it over the time and then add and complete those 4 quadrants. So on this note, we would like to thank Dr. Gerson for being here with us. And until next time on Decoding Parenthood. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Gerson, for being with us today. You gave our viewers and listeners such amazing, valuable nuggets that they will be able to use and improve their experience with their children. We will soon be talking about how screen time affects social interaction amongst children and adults. So stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe. Decoding Parenthood. Let's impact the lives of all our children and make their memories and experience amazing. Thank you.